Good morning. It's May 16th, 10:45 in the morning, and I'd like to go over this small triple demo that I've got here. This is the actual web page itself. I've got a little paragraph element here that says click the buttons to test some functions. I've got a couple of link tags here that if I click here, we have CSS font stack. This is just so that if you want to change any of your font families, you could actually look at the font and the name at the same time and then pick that for your font family if you want to change your font. Then I've got this palette and color wheel, also opens in another tab. And you get a color wheel where you can basically get different shades depending on how you drag these things around or double click on them. And you say you want one of these shades, whether it's one of the lighter ones or one of the darker ones. You click on whichever square you like, and then right here the RGB value, you can click that, right click it, and copy it and paste it right into your code. So if you want to give any of your elements different colors, that's what I did, because each of these buttons, when you click them, it shows a span with a unique ID and a background of green. This one has a background, the span has a background of blue, and this span down here has a background of purple. Well, I wanted the buttons above them to have a slightly different shade of green, blue, and purple, a slightly bit lighter. So that's what I used the palette and color wheel for. Anyway, let me get back to the code for this page. I called this while loop underscore inner HTML.html because well, I've got more than one loop. I've got a for loop, I've got a while loop, and I have a set of if else if conditions in each of these demos. But what they're doing is when you click on the button and you call a function, it's actually affecting inner HTML of these span tags underneath. So that's why I kind of gave it that while loop underscore inner HTML, because that's what it's affecting. HTML, well, initially we've got your doc type HTML, HTML tag, head tag. And I've got four things in the head tag this time. I have a link, rel equals shortcut icon, href equals smile.ico, type equals image / x icon. And that gives my Firefox browser tab here this little smiley face that I created from Paint. Then I've got a title, while loop underscore inner HTML, which I already told you that was the name of this file, but it's also what's showing next to this icon, while loop underscore inner HTML. Third thing I've got here is a link to an external style sheet. Link rel equals style sheet type equals text / CSS href equals style.css. And that's what I've got down here at the bottom, style.css. And I'll go over all of those styles for all of the elements pretty soon. And I'll also go over all of the JavaScript, external JavaScript, which is basically just three functions that are similar but not identical. And this final link actually links to this JavaScript that I called lisa.js, called my own name.js for JavaScript. Script language equals JavaScript, src for source equals lisa.js, and script and head. Now let's get into the body so you can see the code for the elements that you're actually looking at here in the page. What you can't see is a tag called wrapper, and that actually nests everything. So here's the opening wrapper right under the body, opening wrapper tag, and all the way at the end you have the ending wrapper, ending of body, ending of HTML. So let me go to my style.css external style sheet and look for wrapper. And here is my wrapper tag that I created, and here is the set of styles that belong to it. Margin of 0 pixels, padding 10 pixels, width 99%, float left, minimum width of 600 pixels. The reason I gave that a minimum width is because I don't want to get my browser window so skinny that these buttons flow on top of each other. I want them to stay in a nice line like this. So by taking my wrapper and forcing it to not go any more narrow than 600 pixels, I'm able to keep these buttons in line. I Z'd out the border of thick red solid, but I can actually spell it correctly just so that I can show you what the wrapper does. When I gave it this red border, you can see that everything is nested inside of that wrapper. If I were to take my wrapper, instead of giving it a width of 99%, if I were to give it a width of 50%, you can see what will happen. But it's only going to go as far as, since this has a minimum width of 600, I guess it's not going to go any smaller. But if I X the minimum width of 600 out and save it, then you can see this is what happens. Now if I were going to make this to be used on a small device like a phone, then I would want to reconsider how all of these buttons look. I'm sure that I would want this text to be smaller and the buttons to be smaller so that it wouldn't take up the whole interface if this were for a phone. But I didn't make 2 or 3 different style sets for different sizes for this particular video. This particular video is basically going over JavaScripts and how to click a button, call a JavaScript, and make something happen. So let me put my minimum width of 600 back so that this goes back. Like I said, I want it to fit like that. And let me take the width of 50% off. Put that back to what it was. And get rid of the border of thick red solid, because that's just basically something I use when I'm testing how everything's sitting. So that was the style for the wrapper. Now let's look at this P tag. That's paragraph tag. You have click the buttons to test some functions. Here you see that, click the buttons to test some functions. Then you have some space in between that paragraph and this href link. And in between these two href link tags, you have more spaces. And this is how we get that. The and symbol, N for new, B for blank, and SP for space, and then a semicolon to end that. So you have new blank space, new blank space, new blank space. So that's how I got these 3 blank spaces right there. This right here is our link. aref equals http://cssfontstack.com/oldsites/cssfontstack. Target equals _blank, which means when I click on this, it's going to open it in a new tab. And then the actual text that you see, that you click on, CSS font stack, and then the ending link tag, the /A. So there's that link. Close out of this. And the next link right here has, first of all, 3 spaces in between it. And then here's that link. aref equals http://paladin.com, target equals _blank, and the text Paladin color wheel that you click on right here to open that color wheel, again with the target of _blank so that it opens in a new tab. And there's that. Let's close out of this. And then there's the ending of the P tag. So that's that first little section that you see at the top of the page. Now I created some tags called left. So what that is everything in the tags called left are going to hold this button and a span tag that you can't see right now. Everything in the tags that I named middle, that's going to hold this button and this span tag for demo 2. And lastly, I have a section that I called right, and that's over here where it says demo 3 for loop. You've got that button and that span tag. So going back to the set of left tags, let me go down here in my CSS style sheet. Here you have left, comma, middle, comma, right. That means for these left tags, these middle tags, and these right tags, these elements, these sections that I've invented, I have some styles that all three of those will share. They all three will have a border with 10 pixels black outset. They will have a width of 30%. They will have a padding and margin of 0 pixels. They will float to the left, and they will have a text align set to center. Inside the left section, we have a button with an ID of G. If I go down here at the bottom, pound G, that ID gives me this style for that particular button. Background color pound 6 CB359, border 5 pixels of green outset. That's what you're looking at right here, this button. Then you see span with an ID of Demo1. So if I go up here and look for those, first of all of my spans have IDs. This span has an ID of Demo1, this one has an ID of Demo2, and this one has an ID of Demo3. And if I click all of these, you actually get to view the spans. They become visible because the JavaScript that I have in my functions allows it to happen. If you click this again, they go back to invisible. So I'll show you that toggle mechanism once I get into this lisa.js JavaScript file, but I'm not there yet. Let's get back here. My span ID demo. You see here pound demo1, comma pound demo2, comma pound demo3. So for each of these spans special demos, they share these styles. Margin 0 pixels, padding 2%, color white. If I click on all these again, you'll see that the text for all three of them have the font color is white. They have a font size of 20 pixels, a text align of center, and a font family of Arial, rounded, MT, bold, and an initial display set to none, which makes it invisible. Display none means you don't see it displayed. So when I first refresh the page, those spans, you cannot see them. You cannot see them until I click this, and when I click this, it calls a function that makes this actually appear. Instead of display none, it goes to display block. So this set of styles goes for all three spans, but each of these spans you can obviously see not only do they all have white, they also have unique background colors that they only share with themselves instead of sharing with each other. So for Demo1 span, which is where we are right now, this green one that says the number 0 all the way to 4, that is a background color of green and a border of 5 pixels green outset. Demo2 is going to give the style to this span, which is down here in the middle tags. That has a background color of blue, border of 5 pixels blue outset. And then of course Demo3 over here, which is inside of the right tags, and here it is, span ID Demo3, background color of purple, border 5 pixels border 5 pixels purple outset. Alright, so what else have I went over the left, middle, and right sections and their styles. I went over the demo 1, 2, and 3 styles for the spans that are unique and the styles that they share. Oh, I don't think I gave this. The body has a margin of 0 pixels auto, padding of 0 pixels, and I had given it a text align of center but z'd it out. So since I z'd it out, I'm not using, I'm just going to go on ahead and erase that. Alright, so there's my beginning, my body. I already went over these demos. I already went over those demos. I already went over left, middle, and right. Button. Any of the buttons, which if I get rid of the spans at the bottom, these are all the buttons. Each of the buttons have a width of 100%. It's not 100% of the window, it's 100% of this tag that it's inside of. So left, middle, and right tags were given 30% width. So the button is going to be 100% inside of the 30% width of this tag itself, this with the gray border. Okay, and padding 5 pixels, font size 20 pixels, font family Rockwell Extra Bold. So all of these buttons have the same Rockwell Extra Bold font that is 20 pixels in size. The buttons also have their own unique values. This button right here has the ID of G. ID of G says background color, pound 6 CB359, border 5 pixels, green outset. That's doing this right here. This background color is a lighter shade of just green. If I said background color green without these number letter combinations, it would be just as dark a green as it is right now. But I went to the palette and color wheel and I found a shade that was lighter because I wanted there to be a differentiation when I clicked it. Same thing with this and same thing with this. I used the palette and color wheel to find slightly lighter shades, and then I used these number letter symbols that represent those shades. So for the button with the ID of B, which is down here in the middle, button with ID of B, it's got the style of background color pound 4470B5, border 5 pixels, blue outset, right here. And then the last one has pound B, P, which stands for ID, button with an ID of P for purple. Background color pound 8E40B6 and border 5 pixels of purple outset. So I've defined the buttons, the styles that the buttons share, and then styles that are unique to each individual button that has its own special ID. I've went over the left, middle, and right sections that I created with these tags, and each of these tags, left, middle, and right, share styles. And then I've showed spans with their own unique ID, Demo1, Demo2, and Demo3, where they share some styles, and some styles they hog all to their self with their special IDs. And I can't remember if I went over wrapper or not. Wrapper's actually enclosing everything. Margin of 0 pixels, padding of 10 pixels, width of 99%, float left, minimum width of 600 pixels. And if I spell this properly again, you see that this red border is actually nesting all the other stuff inside of it. And so the minimum width of 600 pixels is so that no matter how I try to make this really skinny, it's only going to go so skinny. If I take that minimum width off by misspelling it with a Z and I let it go skinny, then my buttons flow on top of each other, and I don't want that. I don't want that to happen. So I gave it a minimum width of 600 pixels so that it will not do that. And I don't need to keep border thick red solid, so I'll misspell that. And furthermore, I could just erase it since it's not being used. I can't imagine that I'll want to use it again. So just completely take that out. Alright, so I went over all of the code in the HTML web page. I went over all of the styles from top to bottom that styles these elements that you're looking at. So now let's go over the JavaScripts that show the functionality. Here in this left section with a button, the ID of G for green, it's calling a function using the onClick event. OnClick equals my function 1. So right here in lisa.js, the external JavaScript file, I have the word function, and I named it my function 1. And what we do is we create a variable with the name of text, var text equals, and we have an empty set of double quotes. So basically the variable text, it's string, but it doesn't have a value just yet. It's just an empty string. Then I'm going to create another variable that I'm going to use as a counter here, var I equals 0. Then we're going to do a while loop. While I is less than 5. Well, since I starts off at 0, I less than 5 is a true statement. So we're going to take that variable x, and we have plus equals, which means that for every loop, we're going to add another string, another sentence onto this variable. The first sentence is going to say the number is plus I, and the value of I again is 0. So it's going to say the number is 0, plus it's going to pop in a break tag, which is going to force us to go down a line. It's going to take that 0 and increment it up by 1. So the variable I is going to turn into 1 at this point, and then it's going to go back up to the while, and it's going to ask, is 1 less than 5, and that's true. So then it's going to give us another line. The number is 1 and a space, and then 1 is going to turn into 2. Is 2 less than 5? Yes. So it's going to give us another line. The number is 2. And 2 is going to turn to 3. Is 3 less than 5? Yes. It's going to give us another line. The number is 3. 3 is going to turn into 4. Is 4 less than 5? Yes. And it's going to give us another line. The number is 4. 4 is going to turn into 5. It's going to say while 5 is less than 5. Well, 5 is not less than 5. So since that's a false statement, it will not add one more line to the variable text. So then we're going to come down here to our document.getElementById demo1. That's right here. That's our span. See, we have nothing inside of the span tag right now. Well, we're going to put something in here with this line that says document.getElementById demo1 enter HTML equals text. So all of those lines that we got and we put in the variable called text are now going to go right in here, which, if we click this, the number is 0, the number is 1, the number is 2, the number is 3, the number is 4. Now, these two statements right here are what allow us to toggle by using this button. We don't see the span, then we do see the span. Then we don't see the span, then we do see the span. So with each click of the button, we're toggling between seeing the span and not seeing the span. So we are creating a variable called content ID. It's what we're calling it. var content ID equals document.getElementById. Again, we're still referring to that span with the ID of demo1. So we're still talking about in here. Content ID.style.display equals block question mark content ID.style.display equals none colon content ID.style.display equals block. So we are toggling from display equals block to display equals none with these two lines of code, and with the fact that CSS originally created our style for these demo 1, demo 2, and demo 3 display none. So they started off as invisible and they became visible as we used this in our script. Alright, so we went over everything in the left section, the button and the span. The middle, let's go to that function. My function 2. So we already looked at this one, we're done with that. My function 2. So we have button with an ID of B, on click equals my function 2, so it's calling this function right here when you click it. And it's got the text inside, demo 2, a break tag to go down a space, if, else if, all that's right on the face of the button. As you can see, a break tag takes us down to the span with the ID of demo 2, which we're working on right now. This is the same, var text equals empty string. Now we're doing something a little bit different. We're creating a variable and a value for it. We are creating a variable called city to check, and I put in where I was born, Cleveland. I got this from one of the books from the library, so this I did not Google to see if this was in fact true or false, but in this particular set of code, there was supposed to be an array called cleanest cities, and 5 cities were included in that array. So you have 5 elements the very first element of the array will be considered index 0. So cleanest city with an index of 0 will represent Cheyenne. Cleanest cities index 1 will represent Santa Fe. Cleanest cities index 0, 1, 2 will represent Tucson. Cleanest cities index 3 will represent Great Falls. And cleanest cities index 4 will represent Honolulu will represent that. So as you can see, the 5 cities that I have in this array are not including Cleveland. So this is going to show you what happens when we look for a match and don't find it. But the code is built to look for a match. So here we're going to check for the match. We're going to ask an if condition. If city to check, the value, which I told you I created as Cleveland, if it happened to be equal to cleanest cities, and here we have index of 0, which I told you cleanest cities with an index of 0 is in this particular array anyway is Cheyenne. So this will not be a true statement because Cleveland is not equal to Cheyenne. So since this is false, all of this in these curly braces will be ignored. And it's going to ask another one. It's going to ask again if city to check is equal to cleanest cities index 1. Well, we already know because I already explained I picked one that's not going to match. So this is going to be ignored. Now, let's say for instance it was true. Then what would happen is we would execute the line of code in the curly braces. So we would take that variable that we created, text, that had nothing in it but a blank, an empty string, and we would actually fill it with something other than a blank string. One of the 5 cleanest cities on the list is, so those would be the words, a couple break tags to go down a couple of lines. So that would be one statement. Then we're going to use document.getElementById, and we're referring to demo2 here, so we're referring to this span tag right here. If you click right there, that's what it's referring to. And the .inner HTML would be set equal to the text that I just created. One of the 5 cleanest cities on the list is, and a couple lines, and then the value of cleanest cities with the index of 1. That would be if the second element actually did match Cleveland, but we know that it doesn't, so all of this instead will be ignored. We've got another else if, so we're basically repeating ourselves. Now it wants to know if Cleveland is equal to the third element. You got the 0 index, the 1 index, and the 2 index, so that's the third element. And this would be the same code, but it's going to be ignored. This is also going to be ignored. This is going to be ignored because, like I said, we don't have a match. Now, since all of those were not true, we get down to this else, and this is going to be a default, and this is what's going to happen. So that blank text that we had, we are going to put the value of city to check, which I created, with a value of Cleveland. So after the word Cleveland, we're going to have a couple break tags, which means it's going to go down a couple of spaces, which you can see right here, Cleveland, a couple of spaces, and then we're going to add the string is not on the list of cleanest cities. And so there you have it. That's all going to be put inside of this empty span tag right here because we're clicking on that button that calls my function to. So the document.getElementById demo2.innerHTML is going to be equal to text. And the text, like I said, is all of this. We put all of this information into this variable text. So when we put all this variable text here, it's going to go inside of this demo2 ID span tag right there. If I click this again, that disappears. Alright, so that was basically a bunch of if else's, and else statements. This is the same as the other. All this does is allow us to toggle back and forth. var content ID equals document.getElementById demo2. Again, this is what we're referring to, this part of the page. Content ID.style.display equals block, question mark content ID.style.display equals none, colon content ID.style black.display equals black. So again, it starts off as invisible, or basically display equals none. You click it, display equals black. You click it again, display equals none. You get it. All right. Finally, we're going to go over my function 3. That's this section. So we already looked at the middle section and the left section. Our right section has the button with the ID of P, again purple. OnClick equals my function 3, which is what I'm going to go over. Demo3 for loop, Demo3 for loop, and the span ID underneath that you cannot see, and there's nothing into it. There's nothing in it right now but an empty, basically just an empty place for a string. Span ID equals Demo3. So this is going to go inside of there, which is going to go right in here. Var text equals empty string, just like the other. Var, this time we're doing color to check instead of clean as city. So this is very, very similar to the one that we did in the middle, but the code is going to use a for loop instead of an if, else if set of multiple conditions. We're going to use a for loop. Var color to check equals green. So instead of me setting a city to Cleveland, I'm setting a color to green. Now we are using something called a Boolean flag. This is like a light switch. It's like a yes, no, true or false variable. A Boolean variable can only be true or false. It can't be an integer. It can't be a string. It has to be labeled as true or as false. So when something happens in your code and you could flip the switch and change it from false to true, it holds that value and lets you do different things. So we're creating it to assume false. So var match found equals false. Then I'm going to create another array, kind of like the cleanest cities, but this time the array is going to be called picked colors. I could have called it color list or what have you, but I called it picked colors, and I set those colors. Again, they're strings, so they are enclosed in double quotes and separated by commas. So we've got blue, purple, yellow, green, and orange inside of picked colors. Picked colors with an array of 0, an index of 0 would be blue. Picked colors 1 would be purple. Picked colors 2 would be yellow. Picked colors 3 would be green. And picked colors 4 would be orange. Here's the for loop. Var I equals 0. I is going to be our counter, and we're setting it initially to 0. As long as I is less than 5, which it will be for the first time because it's 0, that'll be true. We're going to increment I, so I is going to go from 0 to 1. Now we have our if condition to check. If color to check is equal to picked colors I, so now every time we go over the loop, I is going to change. Picked colors 0, then it's going to go through the loop and it'll turn into picked colors 1, then it'll turn into picked colors 2, so on and so forth. And each time it changes this I to another element, it's going to be referring to either blue or purple or yellow or green or orange. And as this goes through this loop, I picked green, which is going to be true. And green is not picked colors 0, it's not picked colors 1, it's not picked colors 2, it's picked colors 3, which is shown like this. Here's the name of the array, picked colors, and then 3 in the straight brackets. So picked colors 3 is the element green for this particular array. So anyway, it's going to go through there and it's going to go for each one, it's going to look for a match. If it does not find a match, it's going to loop back up. It's going to ignore all this because this condition has to be true. So if picked color 0 is not equal to green, which it's not, that's going to be false. So all this is going to get ignored. It's going to come back up to the loop. And then it's going to say, is picked colors 1 equal to green? Because color to check is green. Well, that's not going to be true, and it's going to keep looping until it is true. When it is true, when green is going to be the proper index of picked colors array, then we're going to take match found, that variable match found that we initially created as false, and we are going to switch it to true right here. Then we're going to take our variable called text, and instead of it being an empty string, we're going to give it some meaning. You matched a color on our list. A couple break tags so that we can go down a couple of lines. Then we're going to use document.getElementById. Yes, we are referring to the span that has the demo3 ID. Inner HTML equals the value of text that we just created up here plus picked colors I. So plus we want to know what was the match that we created. There's our end if and our end for, and obviously you see that when I click this, it says you matched a color on our list, and the color was green. That was all fine and dandy. I wanted to show you what it would be like if it was a positive result, but let's ask it to try to match something that's not on our list. Let's say silver. I do not have silver in my picked colors array list, so we save this here, save the page. So what happens is, if it goes through this whole for loop all the way to when I is no longer going to let it run, I'll be 4 less than 5, it'll run again. 5 less than 5 is not true, so the whole thing will be not true. It went through all the iterations, and so then it comes down to this: if match equals false, because the only time match turned into true is when we found a match with our if condition. We switched match found, the Boolean, from false to true. Well, if match is still equal to false, what we first started out with, then this is going to be our new text value. Your color plus color to check, which I just changed the value from green to silver. So now when the computer looks at color to check, it's actually looking at the value silver. Your color silver, a couple of break tags, so we go down a couple of lines, and the rest of the string did not match any of the array's elements for colors. Then we're going to have document.getElementById, demo3, which is this little section right here, that span, .inner HTML. Everything that we stuffed into the variable called text is going to show up here at this point. It would be just like me typing in your color silver, then going down a couple of lines, did not match any of the array's elements for colors. It would be just like me actually typing this, only I'm not typing this. The script is going to do it for me because I typed it here, and it's going to be put into here. So there's the end of that if. And again, this is exactly the same as it was in the other two functions. This is giving me the toggle ability to let this span show display block or display none. var content ID equals document.getElementById, demo3. Content ID.style.display equals block, question mark. Content ID.style.display equals none, colon. Content ID.style.display equals block. So there's the toggle. End of my function 3, and there's nothing else. This is just a comment, which is basically showing me the toggle again, which I actually don't need. So I can get rid of all that blank code, and I could back out, get rid of a bunch of these blank lines, clean up the code a bit, save it. So I've showed you from top to bottom my 3 functions. I've showed you from top to bottom the CSS external style sheet. I've showed you from top to bottom the HTML web page. I showed you a couple of external links so that you can change your font family or your shades of colors as you would desire. And I showed you how by using percentages for widths, you can automatically let your elements try to fit the page based on the width. And if you don't want the width to go too narrow, I showed you how using a minimum width prevents your elements from jumbling all over the place. If they get to a certain width and you don't want it to go any more narrow, then I showed you how to do that. Again, that was the result for our while loop. This was the result for our if-else if. And this was the result for not matching using a for loop. I don't know if I changed the list, the second one, to show you what it would look like if you did match. Let's see, testing, open my JavaScript back. Right click. Alright, here's my JavaScript again. Let me go back to function 2. I put in Cleveland. Now let me put in one that actually is in the list. Let me put in Great Falls. Great Falls. Now Great Falls is the city to check. So let me refresh this. One of the 5 cleanest cities on the list is Great Falls. This was not a match. And this while loop, I can show you one more thing about the while loop. Alright, let's see how we could do this. We start off with I being less than 5. It's actually 0. And then we increment by 1. I++ would be increment only by 1. But what if I said I instead of plus equals 2. I think I'm doing that right. I hope I'm doing that right. What I'm trying to do is we start off at 0 and then we add 2, so then it's going to go from 0 to 2. So instead of this output being 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, let's see if I did that correctly. Let's refresh. Yeah, so now we went up by 2, 0, 2, 4. And since we only wanted to go as high as 5, we only got these. If I were to change while I is less than, let's say, 10, and save that, refresh, and hit it, now 2, 4, 6, 8. Now we're counting by 2s. We could do the same thing with 3. We can count by 3s. 0, 3, 6, 9. You could change that to as long of a list as you want. So here you're counting by 3s as long as your counter is less than 20. And of course, if you wanted to count by 5s, you can change that I plus equals 5. So I plus 5, and then the result goes back into I. That's how you would read that. 0, 5, 10, 15. If you wanted to count by 1.5, let's see if that works. And it does. The number is 1.5, the number is 3, the number is 4.5, the number is 6, the number is 7.5, 9, 10.5, 12, 13.5, 15, 16.5, 18, 19.5. So you can count by whatever whole or decimal number that you want by doing this as well. Or you could also multiply, you could also divide. But I'm going to go back to the increment by 1, and I'm going to change that to stop at just under 5. Alright, I think I'll stop there.